All right, do it now. Okay, I have mine. Desktop audio. Go ahead.
Testing, testing.
All right, there you go. Well, we were live there. Okay. Uh, yeah, you're good
I
to go.
was I was figuring you'd give a like a signal to go.
Well, I mean, the chairman is supposed to start the hearing.
That's what I
All
meant.
right, James, could you give us your opening statement?
You got a gavel or something?
Sure. Good afternoon, senators, distinguished members of the Government Oversight Committee. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to President George Reagan for appointing me to this extremely important role of Supreme Court member of the United States. I'm open to have any questions, and I just want to talk about how I am committed to the rule of law and upholding court traditions in this country and making sure that this court is fair, free, and prosperous for all Americans. I'm happy to take any questions, and let's get started.
All right. Uh, may I ask for your opinion on abortion and Roe v.
Um,
Wade?
I am a pro-life person. I always have been, and if I am appointed to this position, I would encourage the court to reconsider their stance on Roe versus Wade. And if it was possible, we would look into overturning the decision.
Okay. Would you overturn it completely, giving the right back to the states, or would you instead revise it in some way?
No, we would completely, well, I would vote to completely overturn the decision and return all issues of abortion back to the states.
All right. Would anyone like the floor?
I'll take it. So, following that, what would your definition of settled law be?
Can you repeat the question?
What would your definition of settled law be?
Well, it's a binding precedent, is it not?
Well, I'm asking for how you, as a justice, would determine what court decisions have been settled and which ones are still up for determination. What is settled law? Um, the court can't take on every historical case. Justice Scalia talks about settled law pretty extensively. So, what would you, as a justice, what would your line be for settled law?
Well, I think that depends on the situation, right? Because we're talking about Roe v. Wade, right? Of course, that's not settled law. There's a moral error that we're murdering millions of children in the womb. But on an issue such as like segregation or, interracial marriage, that kind of thing, I consider those to be settled law. And if there were to be a case that would consider us overturning it, I would, of course, continue believing that that is a settled opinion and we would not take it up for debate.
So, in your opening statement, you talked about upholding the rule of law. One of the things that just happened in Yellowstone, which was quite concerning to me, was, and this will bring me into a whole line of questioning. So, but it was very concerning to me how you responded to the election of uh, Governor English and the response to which ended or resulted in the death of a man's life because of negligence on the part of the Yellowstone National Guard. Um, what do you have to say for yourself in terms of why you called for people to be challenging the election results in that state? What was the evidence for that? And you know, we're all here supporters of the First Amendment, but what is what's your line there? I mean, we obviously can't be yelling fire in a crowded theater, and there's some level of law that has to be there for in terms of inciting violence. So what is that level for you? Where do you draw the line there, and then explain yourself for what happened in the Yellowstone incident?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. What happened in Yellowstone over the past few weeks has been an absolute tragedy. And by no means did I intend for a man to be killed on Capitol steps due to the negligence of Yellowstone National Guard. However, the election seemed very fishy to me. We're looking for evidence right now, and we're looking into things because Sean English has been a very corrupt governor. He has edited his constitution without state legislature approval. He hasn't even appointed a state legislature, and when he has, they have been, biased and very corrupt. So I just found it necessary for the
Well,
people
let me
to
stop you
go
right there.
and make their voices heard.
What is? I didn't hear any of it. Where's the? I haven't seen any criminal prosecution being brought forth or attempt to prosecute the governor for overturning or editing the Constitution, if that is actually what happened. Nor have I seen a call for any Senate investigation or House investigation or investigation by the AG. I've only seen rumors that resulted in an election, which made it political. So I'm a little bit concerned here.
Well,
For,
the
for
issue
where
is
we're
there is
going
no
here.
attorney general
But I
because the president has not appointed one.
okay. Well, I mean, I illustrated a number of other ways where prosecution could have taken place: the Senate, the House, within Yellowstone itself. There's a number of ways the investigation could have taken place, and if this happened weeks ago, as you say it did, I'm a little bit concerned as to why that investigation didn't take place and then resulted in a recall election that had political strife and death of American citizens. So how long will it take you, do you think, to get this evidence of malpractice in the Yellowstone election, and where are you looking to get this evidence?
Well, we're looking to get this evidence from members of the admin team. We're looking into their cooperation here.
Who is we?
That's a good question. There's numerous people. I've just been one of the people that's been talking about this. I'm not at the forefront of this effort.
Okay, well, your name was, in the news as being a part of the forefront of this effort. You on Twitter have seemed to be a part of the forefront of this effort.
Well,
What is your definition? Who is the forefront of this effort, in your opinion?
well, I would argue that Mr. Drake is very influenced in this decision. But when a former president gets on Twitter and says anything about anything, people get the news will cover it, especially if it's something like this.
Hold. Well, I haven't seen Senator Drake really being forceful about this after the election. I've seen Senator Drake campaigning for governor when the recall election was a potential thing. But I've seen you, if this isn't a question, but I've seen you, just for the record, be the forefront of this movement. Mr. Reason, what is your plan to maintain impartiality on the court when you're there? How do you plan to assure the American people that you will have a level head in regards to making sure that the Constitution is upheld as it was written?
Well, I plan to look at all cases objectively and follow the Constitution down to the very ink that the paper is on. And I believe that my record as president of the United States shows that I'm willing to work with all sides and be objective in my convictions.
Well, before I ask that question, I suppose, who are your inspirations for being on the court? Why do you want to be on the court?
Well, I want to be on the court to serve my country in more ways than I can. And, after being shot and put into a coma, I felt like my duties were not exercised enough. And when the president reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in this position, I, of course, said yes. Judicial people that I look up to. Well, I have to say, probably my law school professor, even though he's not on the court, he's a very smart gentleman. I would say Scalia, a very good guy. I really like Amy Coney Barrett, personally. But yeah, those kind of people.
Well, what about? Could you point to one in history, a justice in history, and why you like them? What about Justice Scalia inspires you to be on the court?
I think what's very inspiring about Mr. Scalia is just his conviction and how he objectively looked at topics and issues and followed the Constitution to the bare bones of what it prescribed. And I believe that is the most important thing of the
Reclaiming
court.
my
The court
time.
is not a.
Can you point to an instance in which Justice Scalia talked about being objective on the court?
Well, I can't point to a specific instance at this time, but I know
because
he's
there
done it.
isn't one. Actually, Justice Scalia, if you knew a lot about him and listened to him, talked pretty extensively about how objectivity is a false goal to achieve when doing judging or justice work, especially in regards to the Constitution. So I'm a little bit concerned when you issue his name while saying that he was, about convictions and objectivity, when, as someone who studies Scalia, that wasn't necessarily at all what he espoused. So is there another justice in history that you could point to and tell me why exactly you are inspired by them, or tell me why you're inspired by Miss Barrett?
Well, part of the reason I'm inspired by Miss Barrett is because she is a pro-life Catholic, and I believe that my faith is very important to me as well. And I just find that her conviction in using the Catholic faith to justify her decisions is an important thing to me as well, while still
Well, reclaiming
saying,
my time, Miss Barrett also said Roe is settled law. She said that on the stand, and obviously, despite whatever happens in this, because of the leak, we are all engulfed with Roe talk, but every single justice that's on the court right now has called that settled law, because they know the political strife that will happen as from therefore. I'm a little bit concerned, Mr. Reason, that you don't know much about the court and are accepting this position, running here to be a political activist on the court, for an issue which I think we have some common ground on, but nonetheless, I can't vote for political activists on my court. If there are people who I see potential for behind the scenes trying to get a citizen or a lawyer to issue a further decision about Roe, when that has been brought forth to the Supreme Court here and in 1954, and reiterating that issue over and over and over again until your side gets that passed, and your refusal to call that settled law, and agreeing with the political position, as Scalia called it, of how far the pro-lifers go. I I see political activism and not the judicial level-headedness that we need on the court in this moment. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I have a question. What is your stance on the Second Amendment? Will you strive to allow the government to restrict it further, or will you decide to protect it and, to a literal T, that shall not be infringed?
If I am appointed to the Supreme Court, I will defend the Second Amendment by all means necessary. I believe that it is one of the foremost rights. That's why it's number 2, just right after First Amendment, right? And yes, I would protect the Second Amendment. I would not allow the United States federal government to intrude on any more Second Amendment rights. And if there were cases that were brought up to overturn certain bans on certain things and certain laws on gun control and that kind of stuff, I would encourage my fellow court members to look into the overturning of those decisions.
All right. So when it comes to the Constitution, would you remain objective? Would you keep a Jeffersonian point of view, or would you keep a Federalist point of view?
I would say it depends on the context, because there are some things that do need to be looked at objectively. For example, shall not be infringed, right? Right to peaceably assemble, those kinds of things. But there are some things that need to be interpreted. So I would say in some sectors, of course, we need to remain objective. In some sectors, some things are up to discretion of the judges. However, as a general rule, I want to stay objective and clear.
All right. How would you approach? What would your opinion be on the Supreme Court deciding that it was under the First Amendment to allow flag burnings, allow the burning of the flag?
As much as I don't like it, every American has a constitutional right to burn this flag. I think that's a moral disgrace to do it, but since it is constitutionally protected speech, every American has the right to burn an American flag, even if that is something I believe to be morally reprehensible. So I wouldn't even look into overturning that.
Okay. I have no further questions. Does anyone have? Does any Senator Rob, do you have any further questions or no?
I do. I always have questions, so I will try not to stuff up what has happened here. Obviously, something that has been in the news lately is Oberfell versus Hodges. Sort of given your Catholic faith and the fact that you've assured us your political activism on the court, what would your opinion be on Oberfell versus Hodges? And is that settled law? Is this something which you would hope someone challenges in the court on your time while you are there? Please elaborate.
If someone were to challenge Oberfell versus Hodges, I wouldn't want to overturn it, but I would want a revision saying that, legally protected gay marriage should be established in this country, where anybody can get married in a legal courthouse. However, I don't think we should be forcing churches to, or states for that matter, to recognize gay marriage. So if it were to be challenged while I'm on the bench, I would not want to overturn Oberfell versus Hodges. I would only want to revise it to make sure that churches are not required.
Reclaiming my time. Churches should be allowed in state government, but not federal government. That's your position.
No, I'm saying churches should not be required to legally recognize gay marriage.
But your position is that
Courthouses should.
the position of the church should be allowed to be pushed onto the people via the state.
I'm saying no. I think you're misconstruing my words, Senator. I'm saying that the churches should not be forced to perform gay marriages, and the state should be performing them, but the churches should not.
I don't know of an instance in which a church has been forced to perform a gay marriage. I'm sure that would have gone before the Supreme Court. I don't think that's what Oberfeld versus Hodges does, and I want you to point to a specific moment in which that's the case. I mean, it's my understanding that all that does was hold up that people who choose to do that are protected by the Fourth Amendment, which is clear if anyone were to read the Fourth Amendment to get a license and recognize same-sex marriages. Where in Oberfeld versus Hodges does it require a private church, which we here in the United States label as businesses, to perform those ceremonies?
I'm not saying that there has been an instance. I want to revise the decision to make sure that there isn't an instance.
So you want to make law for something which has never happened, which has not. What about Oberfeld versus Hodges allows that to happen? Where in Oberfeld versus Hodges does it say that the state can force a private business to do a ceremony?
I'm not saying that it does. I'm saying that I want to prevent it from doing that.
The state is already not allowed to do that, sir. So and this is, I get back to the political activism point. You're not a legislator on the court. So there's no revising or you make decisions based on the Constitution and the law. That doesn't sound objective to me, Mr. Reason. It sounds like you're politically motivated on the court. There have been many people who are strictly pro-life, religious fanatics, people who have written crazy things on the Supreme Court. Many of those people I disagree with completely, but they weren't political activists, and unfortunately, Mr. Reason, you're presenting yourself as a political activist who are going to go back to these decisions or behind the scenes get someone to introduce them to the Supreme Court and have what should be settled law. In a lot of these cases, I'm not necessarily ascribing settled law to any one or the other, but cases which should be settled law won't be anymore as a result of your nomination, and that's very concerning. I hope to see you run for office again. I hope to see you out in the political sphere. That your movement needs you, but for the Supreme Court, I think we need someone else. With that, Mr. Chairman, I think if you have no further questions, that's probably.
I do have one more.
Okay. Well, that's it for my time.
For the, as you've seen in the news, we've seen book bannings. Certain books have been being banned for all sorts of reasons. Some I agree with, some I disagree with. What would your overall stance be on that? Would you defend the banning of the books as a potential way of groups to, say, affect our children politically, or would you defend and overturn these book bannings?
In the United States, we define vulgarity in very different ways, and I think that on many things like this, it should be up to the states. And if it is constitutionally protected speech, it should not be banned. But if it's a book telling children to go commit genocide or something, of course it should be banned. That's not something we don't want the kids reading, right? It really does depend on the situation.
Would you be fine with allowing books that very descriptively present the events such as the rape of Nanking or the Holocaust, would you allow such books in our schools?
In our schools, no.
May I ask, because you've seen in the news how Mouse has been banned, correct?
Yes.
Would you agree with that banning?
Well, I have not read the book in full, but what I do know is that in instances where there are, explicit content, we don't necessarily want those to be projected to younger children. There's a reason we have rated R movies and that kind of things. You
So
have to be
what you're
18 to
saying,
go.
is it would be very much dependent on where it's presented, such as if it's presented in a senior class or if it's presented in a kindergarten class.
Yes.
Okay. I do have another. Would you be? Are there any? Are there any individuals, not that have been on the Supreme Court, but any, like, for instance, political figures like the founding fathers that you do look up to that have inspired you or somewhat?
I would say that certain political figures that have inspired me is President Calvin Coolidge, President Teddy Roosevelt, Barry Goldwater, Pat Buchanan, all these kinds of traditional conservative gentlemen that have done great things for this country in the past. I've looked up to them in the past, and I have used their example to govern.
What makes you look up to them as inspirational figures?
Well, I mean, it depends. Pat Buchanan is a great writer. Calvin Coolidge managed an incredible economy, was a very humble gentleman. Teddy Roosevelt took on monopolistic entities and restored power back to the American worker. And, these kinds of people are incredibly amazing for their you know, different reasonings. But I'd say as a general rule, all of them were great leaders, and they led this country through time of turmoil and through time of peace.
Would you say that they executed their authority correctly? I'm referring to the ones that held office.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
So-
I would say that.
Yes, Rob?
if I may, I want to bring it back to the books.
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Reason, what power, in your view of the Supreme Court, I almost said the State House, I talk about the State House too much, in what view, as a Supreme Court Justice, what part of your role would include banning books? Where do you see that power coming from? And then I have a follow-up in regards to the First Amendment. But
Well, I don't think that power belongs in the Supreme Court. That belongs to the legislature. And that if somebody
Okay.
were to challenge a law banning a book, then that's where we would come into play.
so what is your view on the First Amendment then? Because it is my opinion that the state, giving the state that power to ban books, is an extremely slippery slope. People have written about that for generations, far before the modern age. How do you not see giving the state the power to ban speech, ban text, ban narratives as a slippery slope?
Yet again, Senator, I think you're misusing my words against me in this situation. I've never said that we should ban books. I'm saying we
No,
should,
you said
prevent
you
them
said we
from
should
being.
ban them from schools. And
Yes.
any
If there are-
cognizant, I'm reclaiming my time. Any cognizant political observer, lawyer, anyone who's gone to 2 years of college will know very clearly that banning those books from schools chills that speech, not just in schools, which is a very important place to have those conversations, in my opinion.
Well, I didn't
And
want to go on the offensive, Senator, but
have I asked
why?
you a question? Have I asked you a question? I'm pretty sure it's my time. Not only does it chill speech in those schools, where children should be learning and educating about our world and everything in it, not 2-year-olds, obviously, but kids of a certain mental capacity should be learning and studying about everything in our world. But it also chills that speech after those children are out of school. And if you don't know that, you're negligent, but I very well think you do. That speech must be allowed to propagate in the United States. Never before have we banned speech. Never before have we banned books. That cannot be allowed to take place. I'll ask you the question again. How do you not see it as a slippery slope to be chilling speech, and maybe I'll specify it so you can't say I'm misconstruing, in our schools? How do you not see that as a slippery slope, Mr. Raisin?
Well, Senator, I don't see it as a slippery slope because you are misconstruing my words. Why do you want a book that talks about explicit sexual activities in a seventh grade library? That's my question to you. Because the reason that I said that those books should not be in schools
What book are you
is
talking
because the
about?
development, there's been instances of many books such as this.
Name one.
I don't have the books in front of me,
Name one.
Senator.
Name a single instance of a book with 50 Shades of Grey like sexual activity in it. If you're talking about a book which mentions sex, yeah, I think that should be in a seventh grade classroom. Seventh graders are thinking about that whether or not they read about it. If you're 12 years old in seventh grade, Mr. Reason, do you not know about basic anatomy? That's when you're starting puberty. That's when you're starting to look at people in a sexual manner. And despite, whatever you believe about sex before marriage, that happens in our society. And I want kids to have a full and cognizant view of sexual education, so they're not making the mistake of unsafe sex.
Well, why should there be pornographic content
I have not
in
asked
our
you a question.
libraries?
Please, let Mr. Rob finish his time.
Of unsafe sex, of of teenage pregnancy. Studies have shown, and there's millions of studies out there, billions and billions, that show that restricting sex education, banning that speech, does not work. And just as a matter of principle, bans in general don't work. Whether you look at alcohol, whether you look at marijuana or the other drugs, it only proliferates poor and abusive use of those substances. And in this instance, banning that speech, which is, again, not on the power of the court, but only proves my point about political activism, would seriously proliferate the abuse of sex crimes, lonely boys feeling, the incel culture. All of that would proliferate even further because people would be having these feelings that they don't know exactly what are about. I don't know a single instance, and you could not even point me to one, in which this was the case. This is a culture war argument that has been propagated in the media for far too long. It's not the case. Seventh graders who are 12 and 13 years old, yes, I think should be allowed to read whatever book they want to. Should an elementary school have books like that? Probably not. Do elementary schools have books like that? No. That's up to the school boards. That's up to the localities. I would never give the federal government that power. It's very troubling to me that you would. I thought we were in agreement about small government. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions for this round, I'll say. I mean, I've said no further questions every time I've had a question, but no further questions for this round.
All right. I have one question. Consent. Would you say that the United States federal government, when it comes to certain actions over the past, say, 60, 70 years, has overstepped its authority? And would you say the Supreme Court has not checked that authority?
Yes, I feel like the authority of the federal government has remained unchecked for far too long. In instances such as, Afghanistan and Iraq, where those were completely unnecessary wars for the United States to jump headfirst into. Um, Specific instances, you know, federal government oversight with gun control and those kinds of things. And I feel like the court does need to take a bigger role in checking the federal government.
Back to, so you would say acts such as the Patriot Act, the Supreme Court should have stepped in and just flat out prevent its prevent it?
Yes. Luckily, the Patriot Act has been overturned, but um, if it hadn't been, if I was on the court and Patriot Act were to be brought up, I would consider just flatlining it.
Also, I do have another question concerning the education department. We've seen in the news how Texas authorities are challenging the requirement for children to include for granting school to all kids, no matter if they're illegal, including illegal immigrants. What would your position be on that?
Can you repeat the question?
Recently, Texas in the news, there has been a new event going on between Texas and the Supreme Court, where Texas is trying to challenge the Supreme Court challenge the idea that education should be granted everyone, including illegal immigrants. What would your position be on that?
Well, I think the American education system is reserved for American citizens.
So you want, all right. So you would just simply revise it.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, what would your policy be with dealing with, I think at this point it's around 15 million people who would be not at school, not at work, not able to do any of those things? What should we do with 11 million of those people?
They should become citizens.
And what is your process to getting there?
Go through the naturalization process. I mean, this is pretty
Well, Mr. Rees, I
commonly
mean,
held.
I'm confused. Are you unaware of the inefficiencies of the naturalization and documentation citizenship process? I mean,
Sure, I'm aware
if
of
it
those
was
issues,
if there
but I
weren't
don't believe that's
issues,
the court's job.
I'm a little bit confused on why the nominee is speaking over a senator.
Can we, James Reason, please
But
let Robert Wheeler have his time.
if you if you weren't aware, people are not coming here in droves because they want to be. They want to be here, but they're not coming here in droves illegally because they want to be breaking the law. The overwhelming majority of these people are not criminals. They're coming here because our system backlogs them for decades. You have people on the log who applied in the 1990s. I mean, this is a system which needs radical reform, and I think focusing on the fact that those people are here, barring them from schools where children have made significant relationships, where you've seen children who are undocumented go through college and become very successful people, get documented as a result of going to college. That's the American dream, in my opinion, and I think this further proves the point. I mean, you just answered Senator Reason's question a few minutes ago about the overexpansion of the federal government. I completely agree, but I think I see very contradictory beliefs in that with you, because you want to chill speech, you want to ban certain books. Um, that's not state power. You want to restrict undocumented people from going to school. Schools have always allowed anyone in their community who pays taxes and can present forms of identification, which, if an undocumented person is in the school, they clearly were able to attend school, get an education, learn English, and participate in our society. That's been the case since before Ellis Island. That's the American dream. So what about having undocumented people in those schools? What about the children who are undocumented in those schools right now upsets you?
Nothing upsets me. I just want there to be space for, people who are American citizens. And
So,
if they are tax
reclaiming my
paying,
time, where is there not space for American children in the current education system? Just point to one county, school system, district.
I'm saying as a general rule, Senator.
Well, general rules should be put in place as a result of something that's happening in reality. If this isn't happening, why would we put in place a general rule which would disrupt millions of children's education, while and displacing them, while not fixing any of the core issues of education, and not opening any more space for children who are already in the United States of America? It is my understanding that the education system is perfectly open. Every single child in this country could go to a public school if they so wished. We have that capacity. The problem with public school is the curriculum itself, and I'm sure we have some common ground on that. Why would we be focusing on a government? Why do you think we should be focusing on, as a government, on restricting children from going to school if there is no occupancy issue, capacity issue? And like if you said there was a capacity issue, if you can point to one example, that'd be great. But why would we be doing this if there isn't a capacity issue?
Hold on. Well, if undocumented immigrants are paying taxes and they are having identification, I see no issue with them attending school. But if they aren't, and they still manage to, end up in school with falsified documentation, that's an issue
Why?
because they're breaking the law.
But I think, Mr. Reason, you have to understand that, and this is the case for many laws. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about it. Some laws must be bent. Every president, every good president, in my opinion, both Roosevelt's, Eisenhower, good presidents, principled men, statesmen, senators, representatives, and other justices of history have talked far more eloquently than I will about this, but sometimes rules must be bent for the greater good. Having uneducated, undocumented people who can't speak the language running around the country, that's an unideal situation. I would much rather have those children be able to, and we're not talking about the adults here, I'd much rather have those children be able to, whether they're coming from the woods, they have to go back to their camp in the woods every day after school. I would want those children to still be able to have that space and go to school, whether or not they are by the book breaking the law. What about the statement they are breaking the law is so important, where we could restrict millions of children from getting an education, having a space that's not with a potentially abusive parent, escaping a homeless situation, escaping a dangerous situation for 8 hours a day and finding some peace and solace. Why would undocumentation be a reason to restrict those children which are already participating in the system?
Okay. My point is, And I believe I illustrated this point already, that if they're paying taxes and they have identifiable forms of
Okay, well,
ID and
I
they
know the
still
point
are
you're
not
making, so I'm going
citizens.
to reclaim my time and I'll ask the question differently. Why would it be efficient if we want a less bureaucratic, more efficient government to have a means tested system in which we have to have a, because this is what would have to be the case if we do that policy, a different administration which would go around to 300 million different people, find them, see if they're undocumented. If they are undocumented, are they paying taxes, working in coordination with the IRS? That's a whole other floor of a government building, just to see if they're paying taxes, and then you have to have another floor to see if they're participating in the school. And then, if we're going to be honest about it, if a child is, if we're going to means test it, if a child is getting bad marks, why would we be allowing that to happen? That's another floor. Do you see the problem with the administrative bureaucracy that could be created here from means testing this, and not just leaving the issue alone, and continuing to allow those people to attend school peacefully and respectfully as they are right now?
Sure, I do.
Okay. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
All right. This goes back to the whole. What do you define as an American citizen, James Reason?
Somebody who has been legally naturalized by the United States federal government.
Are there any more criteria?
No, I don't think so.
Mr. Mr. Chair, I actually do have a follow up
Oh my
to
God.
my questions. Um, Mr.
Go
Reason,
ahead.
what is your definition of small government then? Because in every instance in which I've actually probed you, you're talking about bigger government.
It's a very subjective definition. Small government is, government that protects the rights of its citizens and, allows states to do things that the states decide it needs to do. I mean, I'm not sure how
But
this
just
question
just
is
just for the
relevant.
record, small government does not include having the federal government ban books for children in schools. It does not include an administrative bureaucracy for means testing 11 million to 15 million undocumented people in this country. It does not include further administrative bureaucracies to allow the implementation of cultural policies to follow um, the ideology that you have espoused here today in this committee room. Um, I think your definition of small government is less of a principle and more of a talking point, Mr. Rees, and that's a little bit concerning to me. And I will harken back to the political activism point, because on the court, I mean, and I made this point to Senator Drake in private. I welcome a conservative on the court. I have many conservative values. Uh, I do not welcome a political activist on the court. And you came here saying you want to do this, you will do this, you're going to revise this. You know, it's on the record. That's concerning to me. I've never seen that before in a Supreme Court nomination process, not here, not in real life. And we don't need political activists on the Supreme Court. And I urge the President and I urge the Senate to seriously consider what I say here. We do not need political activists on the court. I urge you, Mr. Reason, to run for office, and I'm sure you'll win. But the Supreme Court is not where you belong at this moment, and I think there are many people in this community who do represent that level-headedness, who would do much better on the Supreme Court. I mean, you and I are friends, and it's hard for me to say this, but I think it's true. Mr. President, I yield. Mr. Chairman, sorry.
All right, continuing on with my point. So you simply state that a naturalized citizen of the United States is an American citizen. Would a citizen? So if someone is not paying taxes, but they're a naturalized citizen, or let me rephrase that. Would paying not paying taxes not be considered an American, being an American citizen to you?
If I'm honest, I'm not sure I understand the question, but
Is paying taxes a crucial part of being an American citizen?
I would believe so, yes.
So then, it would be one of the most important criteria. If you're paying taxes already, would you say they're an American citizen?
Well, not necessarily. It's a big part of being an American citizen, but it doesn't define you as one.
Okay.
Mr.
I have
Chairman,
no. Yes, Rob.
should it
Would you like?
define you as an American citizen? Paying into the American experiment, should that define as an American citizen? I understand right now it does not. Should it, in your opinion, define you as a citizen?
I don't
I
think
believe
so.
I believe that as long when there are multiple criteria to being an American citizen: staying in the country for a time, paying taxes, and not committing any crimes while on your stay. I believe that's a criteria. I believe that's what an American citizen is. But paying taxes being the most crucial one, since that means that means you're not being a drain on the American taxpayer, and you're paying into the American idea, or well, you're paying the IRS. I yield my time. Well, does anyone have any further questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think, Senator Drake was here for a second, but I'm pretty sure we can wrap this hearing up.
I'll ask Senator Drake if he has any further questions.
Well, let me remind you, Mr. Chairman, that it's also possible that a member of the Senate could motion to have a full Senate hearing. This is just the committee hearing, so it probably is best for us not to extend it too long, because Drake and all the other senators will have a chance to ask a question tomorrow, I'm sure.
All right. I guess I shall motion for the committee to vote, if that is correct.
It would be a motion to end the hearing, and then
A motion to end
to debate.
Okay.
Then you would call a motion to debate in the
Sorry.
Committee itself, and we would debate for
All
a
right.
second, and then the vote.
A motion to end the hearing.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
All right. And a motion to begin debate.
Second.
All right.
Okay. Well, you should type out the debate is open in
Hold on one second.
the committee.
Sorry, I'm doing something stuff right now.
And that the hearing is closed. I will turn us off.
Thank you, James Reason, for your time. You may exit, if you so please.
Of course.